Okay, great. Thank you to everybody who's tuning in now. We're just going to give it a few more seconds to let people join us today. All right, okay. Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us and welcome to this conversation, Free Tools for Internet Freedom, as a part of NDI's Democracy and Technology Summer Series. I'm Madeleine Nicoloff. I am a program associate on NDI's Democracy and Technology team. And at NDI, we work with local partners to promote more open, accountable, and responsive representative governments. And so all summer long, our Democracy and Technology team have been
recording Instagram.
Oh, perfect.
Hey, I'm sorry. I was having issues with Zoom.
At all. We just are starting, so this is perfect timing. I'm just giving a little introduction to the summer series, and then you can kick it off. So thanks, Eman. So yeah, the summer series is just a series of conversations we've been hosting all summer long with our partners, with the NDI Democracy and Technology team's partners, highlighting resources for the democracy community that focus on issues in technology that we've been engaging with. So really excited to be here with you all today and with our panelists. Thank you all for joining us. And we want this to be a really open conversation. So we'd really love to hear from you in the chat. Please do ask your questions in the chat and share any thoughts that you have. And make sure to select all panelists and attendees as well when you do so that we can make sure to hear from you and get the conversation going. So with that, also, if you'd like to start by telling us where you're joining in from, we'd love to hear that as well. So please feel free to put that in the chat. So I guess for the conversation today on free tools for internet freedom, there are three big takeaways that we are hoping this conversation will highlight. First is just recognizing that fighting for democracy and human rights today requires being online. And this is at the same time that fighting or being online and the internet has become more difficult and dangerous than ever. But there are tools out there that are being developed to support activists and just people in repressive environments and allow people around the world to exercise their fundamental human rights online. So today we're hoping to learn about the range of these tools, these internet freedom tools that the Open Technology Fund has been supporting and that NDI in partnership with IRI, the International Republican Institute, is also being able to contribute support to thanks to the generous funding of the NED, National Endowment for Democracy. So we'll hopefully talk about some of these tools and also understand kind of how we can support collaboration between this internet freedom community and the democracy and human rights activist community down the road. And that NDI and the NED family are advocates and OTF are advocates in this space for helping find ways to better engage our democracy partners in this internet freedom community and find the tools that are best fit for them when needed. So with that, I'm going to just quickly introduce our panelists today. Thank you all for joining us. We have Tetyana Bohdanova, who is a specialist in elections and civil society development. She's a researcher and studies technology's impact on democracy. She has over 4 decades of field-based experience in citizen engagement and electoral transparency work across Eastern Europe, Eurasia, and beyond. We also have Eman Jaradat, who's joining us she's a program manager at Open Technology Fund, or OTF, which is an independent nonprofit organization that supports projects focused on counteracting repressive censorship and surveillance. And before joining OTF, she supported community media broadcasting, access to information, freedom of expression at Community Media Solutions, and is a co-founder of the Jordan Open Source Association. Raphael Mimoun is the founder of Horizontal, a nonprofit that leverages technology for rights and justice. He trains grassroots groups and movements around the world and has consulted on digital security for organizations like Oxfam, Reporters Without Borders, and Vital Voices Global Partnership. So thank you all so much for joining us. We're excited to get this conversation started, so let's jump in. And I think to begin, it would be great to just address and talk about what are internet freedom tools, kind of for what people who might not know and why they're important. So maybe Eman, if I could direct it to you to begin, if you wouldn't mind being able to tell us a little bit about the background of OTF, what it does, maybe what these tools are, and what gap is OTF filling?
Sure. OTF has been there since 2012. It started out of the need for building secure tools to provide them to journalists who were working in repressive internet environment in order to ensure their privacy and safety and security. And that's, I guess, what we still do until today. So we support building technologies and we support generally efforts that enhance internet freedom in repressive internet context and around the globe through supporting the development of technology that enhance privacy and security for users and advanced circumvention tools that actually enable users to access internet in repressive internet context. So basically as a response to internet blocking and internet shutdown. We do that through supporting three main pillars. The first is technology development that includes deployment, developing new technologies or advancing existing technologies. The other pillar is applied research, so research efforts that leads to improvement in technology and leads to improved understanding, our understanding of censorship machines everywhere in the world and surveillance and all other things that we're trying to counter here with building technologies. And then the third pillar is digital security. So we support digital security efforts that advance the safety and security of people at risk, but at the same time also provide feedback for technology and tools. So we're able to kind of understand how users have been using all these set of tools available to enhance their digital security and provide feedback to technologists building these tools so they're able to improve these tools as we go. In addition to that, OTF provides a set of services to support the community, including localization effort, usability support for projects in the internet freedom space. So generally all other services that would enhance users' ability to access internet, open internet, free of censorship and surveillance.
Thank you so much. Yeah, really just critical services. And OTF really is kind of the leading organization in the support for these kinds of tools. And so maybe Tanya, building off of that, if you'd be able to speak from your experience working with partners, kind of how you identified the needs of partners in the digital rights space that you were working with, and the types of tools that they needed to help achieve their goals.
Thank you, Madeleine. I think maybe about 10, 15 years ago, we spoke of digital activism as something separate and unique, but now it's very difficult to kind of draw the line between online and offline activism, and any human rights defender or democracy activist really needs to be online all the time in order to do their work. In many places where I worked, especially in closed environments, activists have very limited or no access to kind of traditional media, mainstream media, and therefore the ability to be online is kind of critical to them being able to communicate with their audiences, to communicate with each other securely, to do any kind of organizing. And in addition to that, cybersecurity is becoming increasingly important given how many different tools and tactics are being used against activists by their adversaries. I can speak specifically to the needs of election observers with whom I worked for most of my professional life. And for election monitors in most places, the ability to quickly, securely, reliably collect data, collect evidence is really critical, kind of essential to their work. And this has been my experience. I'm an NDI alumna, and in my experience with NDI, I worked with election observers in Eastern Europe and Eurasia. And actually, in many cases, the ideas for the tools that people needed came from the activists themselves. But even though they had been voicing these ideas to us, they usually don't have the ability to develop these tools themselves. Therefore, it's critical to have somebody who can kind of step in and help them do this. Madeleine, I can move on to talking about Tella or.
Yeah, I think this would be a great chance to kind of talk about Tella, and maybe Raphael, you could also jump in where you'd like to. But if you want to start us off, Tanya, on maybe how they identified the need for this tool, and we could turn it over to Raphael to explain a little bit of the development process.
So Raphael, I'll leave it to you to explain in detail what Tella is. But basically, I think around maybe 2016, the election monitors in the region have started coming up to us with the idea for a mobile tool that would help them do data collection. People have used a variety of tools before that. They used text messages, they used phone lines, etc. But none of them, I guess, were as reliable or as let's say resilient as this tool that people had been envisioning. And at some point, NDI decided to help with developing such a tool. And we embarked on kind of a series of consultations with election observers in the region, asking them what kind of features they'd like to see in the tool, what kind of risks the tool should help them mitigate, et cetera, and also looked at the tools that were already out there to make sure we were not reinventing the wheel. Finally, we really wanted to make sure that whatever tool would be developed would be open source, and that it's not just going to be developed and put out there, but there would be a group or an organization that would make sure that the tool lives on and is being supported and people can continue using it for as long as they need to. And so this kind of sustainability, I think, was also critical for us. And this is when we partnered with Raphael, and the earlier iteration of Tele kind of came to be through this partnership. Raphael, I think I'll give it over to you to talk about Tele.
Sure. Thank you for that, and for that introduction, and also for bringing about Tella through this work. And it's interesting because at the same time as Tanya and her team were engaging in those consultations on the ground, specifically around election monitoring and election observation, we were providing digital security trainings, which we still do today. But for us, it was through those digital security trainings that we were seeing a need. And it wasn't as much about data collection in the way that election observers need it. It was more generally about mobile security, about how do you protect the data that you have on your phone, whether it's photos, video, audio recording, from someone taking your phone and looking through it, right? And searching for something incriminating, trying to destroy the evidence you collected. And so during our digital security trainings, working on mobile security with activists, human rights defenders, journalists, we saw that there was just a massive gap there where users could try to use commercial tools, but there was probably going to be some privacy and security risks involved, or there were very few human rights focused tools that were available, so that they did exist, but they were very complex to use and very often inaccessible. And so it was about that time when we were brainstorming, okay, how can we bridge that gap, that we started working with NDI on data collection. And so this is what really Tella is about today. It's both of those pieces together. It's about protecting users from surveillance their mobile devices as they are doing documentation and data collection on the ground, as they are traveling. Maybe they're going back to an internet connection or going back home after monitoring an election or after documenting a protest, for example. So protecting them from those threats and that surveillance, and also enabling easy, secure, accessible data collection for election monitors and observers and for other organizations who need that. So that's what Tella is in a nutshell. It's kind of encrypting, hiding, protecting data on the phone, and then enabling that data to make its way securely and encrypted to an organization server. Maybe it's an election observation organization, maybe it's just a human rights group, maybe it's a media organization, but making sure that they are able to access that whether it's evidence or data that they can use later on for their human rights work.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, the development of Tella and your guys' role in this is just a really great example of how these tools are really designed with the users in mind and collecting the feedback and that collaboration that is so important. So I don't know, Raphael, if I could throw it back to you, just talk maybe a little bit about why free and open source software versus commercial solutions to things, and maybe even just helping. Tanya touched on it, but explaining exactly what that is and the benefits that come from that in terms of, and also the project, the work you're still doing with Tele to kind of do more user testing and get feedback and developments.
Sure. So free and open source software so what that means, first of all, free and open source means that the code behind an application, behind a tool, behind a software is freely available for anyone to access, audit, review, but also to reuse. So that if tomorrow we have someone in Zimbabwe who likes Tella, but they want to spin their own localized version of Tella based on local needs, if there is a developer or an organization there, they can literally just take the code and do their thing, right? We're not going to ask anything. We're going to be more than happy, because that's why we're developing Tella, and that's why we're working with open source, in the hope that it's going to enable others to just work with it and maybe build on top of it. So that's a big part of it. The second part of why open source is really a question of security and safety, because anyone can audit the code, anyone can review it. That means that any researchers, any security experts, any cybersecurity organization can just look at it and identify vulnerabilities. And that's really a huge thing when you're developing for populations and communities that are at risk of surveillance and repression, at high risk of surveillance and repression, to make sure that, no matter who you are and who is developing the software, there will be vulnerabilities. So it's not about if, it's about when something will come up. And so the more open code is, the more likely you are to have that vulnerability identified and you're able to fix it. And I think that's also partially why the Open Tech Fund is so amazing and so impactful, is because all of the projects that is funded are, I think by default, they have to be open source. So that there is that transparency, and there is also those that capacity to just build on top of each other's projects and so on. So that's why open source, I think, if we think about commercial products and why there is a need for human rights tools, why there is a need for free and human rights and free and open source tools, there is that big privacy component. And then there is also just features, just very simply, the fact that commercial tools are developing for the largest possible audience to make the largest amount of money possible. And so they are not going to focus specifically on this niche of human rights and democracy activists that have very specific needs, that face very specific threats. And so those commercial tools can put them at risk as a result. If we think about WhatsApp, for example, as a great communication tool, easy to use, accessible, performant, reliable. So it does a great job at enabling people to communicate. And that's why I think 2 billion people are using it today. But it's owned by Facebook. and it collects a whole bunch of information about users, about who talks to who and when, and that's enough to put people at risk. And even thinking about one step further, Signal, that is developed to protect from surveillance, but from a specific kind of surveillance, which is kind of bulk data collection and eavesdropping. Signal still requires users to input their phone numbers. So that means that if you're an activist and you're in a group with 150 people with other activists and journalists, you don't know everyone there, but you can see everyone's phone numbers. And just that piece can put people at risk. And so that, I think this really shows why we need something like Briar, for example, that is kind of an alternative to Signal specifically for human rights defenders, that take those into those considerations kind of into account from the onset when they start developing, when they start designing, because they're developing for those communities very specifically.
Yeah, thank you. That is a really good point. And just all really highlighting the importance of this free and open source tools and the development process that you take. I think that's something we've been seeing on our democracy and technology team and working with partners is that everybody, they really have a sense that they need these tools and that there is this need, but it's hard to know which ones are the best fit for specific contexts and needs. And for security reasons, it's so important to make sure that you are using ones that fit the threat model you're facing in the best way. So, so really important work that is being done in this internet freedom community to fit that and address it. And maybe on that note, Eman, if you'd like to speak a little more about the range of tools that OTF supports to let people know kind of you know, from organizational security resources to messaging applications or even methodologies. I think I'd love to hear kind of more from you on that. And I think also OTF has been really focusing on security audits and accessibility and usability maybe. So all of that, thanks.
Sure, so many things to talk about. OTF support projects. I mean, like we support a lot of stuff, and maybe when it comes to technology, in infrastructure, I would say we support technologies that are response to users' needs, right? Like Tele, Signal, Tor, like all of these tools that like Circle, or like all of these tools that are now also like was supported by the NED family. So these are a direct response to users' needs to be more secure, to have more privacy, to access censored internet, to use tools while shut down in order to be able to communicate. And then the other kind of stuff OTF support is what we used to call core infrastructure fund, and now it's technically within our internet freedom fund, but that's what we still want to support, which is securing more things that users don't necessarily see, like core protocols that actually connects the internet together, or supporting initiative like Let's Encrypt, which is basically making free certificates, security certificates available for like the web. So we're able to make more websites with SSL certificates, and that would enable more users to access websites that are secure. So basically that's why when we say users impacted by what OTF support, like we say sometimes we have 2 billion users using OTF, different supported set of technologies, whether it's directly targeted for users to use, or it's for securing the infrastructure of the internet and what is actually comes in the layer under what users see. And then under the kind of initiatives we support, so as you mentioned, like all secure communication apps, like OTF supported the development of the Signal protocol, which is now used by Signal, and WhatsApp say that they use it, but as Raphael mentioned, they're not an open source tool, so we're not able to verify that fully, and there are other changes they're doing. We support tools that make users able to circumvent the internet blocking, like all the VPNs that we invest in, like developing for different groups of people to be able to access unfiltered internet. And then we support tools like prior, for example, OTF support localization of priors continuously for like countries with internet shutdown or with like internet emergencies, blocking, shutdown, all the different stuff. So so that's one set of things we support. And then we support tools we classify under internet measurement tools like UNI, which enable all the different researchers to keep measuring the internet blocking to verify internet shutdown in different countries. And under that set of family, we have other tools like IOTA, and then we support the development of Geneva, which is a research project that is actually using AI to understand censorship in different countries around the world. So that's another category of things we support. I mean, I could go forever talking about all the different tools, but I want to maybe just talk about the importance of open source and security audits. So OTF has it in the rules that any technology we support the development of, whether starting from scratch or we supporting certain features, need to accept to go through security audit once this work is done, just to make sure that we are not encouraging people to use things that would put them further in risk. We are making sure that any further development done to any apps or applications that we're promoting specifically to users at risk. I mean, like we mentioned all these technologies, and we say we're building them for journalists and people in like a specific situation where they have a higher risk than other users, but that the digital security is important now for everyone. Like a lot of people use Signal despite them not communicating super sensitive content, just because they want to feel they have a sense of privacy and control over their data. What I was going to say is like open source, in addition to it being a way for people to collaborate and build on each other work, it's also very important for us to say the code is out there, available, anyone could go and verify it. The importance of like security audit, that we're able to kind of keep up to date, saying like, you know, these technologies are secure and people should be using them because their vulnerabilities have been assessed over time. And in that also we invest in like security research for technologies that we don't necessarily support, like OTF invest in researchers working on figuring out VPN vulnerabilities, like the most popular VPNs and what are technical vulnerabilities that could put people in risk, and then they communicate with VPNs and then try to get them to fix these. So like that's all under our efforts to kind of ensure that security and privacy is a very high priority. And then you mentioned our work on accessibility and usability. We started Usability Lab 6 years ago. OTF realized that if the tools that are being developed for people to use in order to have more security and privacy are not user friendly and not easy to use, then people would just like go to a training and download all these different applications and then get out of the training and never use any of them. And under that effort, we've been doing usability audits for technologies, whether OTF support them or they just come to us and say we need a usability audit, and then we partner with partners of OTF Usability Lab who have extensive experience in usability issues. So, and then now we're expanding this to accessibility, making sure that technology developers invest in accessibility and usability from when they start. Like when an application comes to us, ask for funding to build something, we're from the very beginning asking about how did they take usability and users' needs and how users would actually view this from the very day one. I guess I covered your question. Did I? Was Robin's response as well part of this?
Yeah, thank you. There's just so much that OTF is doing. Just, yeah, it was a huge question. And thank you for, covering a lot of that. I think there's also a question in the chat I see we should try to get to, but I think I also want to just build off of the point of accessibility too. There's so much we can hear on that. At this point, though, I might just ask if Summer could throw in the link to the free and open source tools for internet freedom list that we have put together at NDI on our democracy and technology team in partnership with IRI to kind of just give a brief overview of some of these tools that, thank you, Summer, that we are able to contribute to supporting and in partnering with OTF in supporting some of these tools. And so, as Eman described, they range a whole range of different services and different needs. So from avoiding surveillance, we've, if you click the link and check out the document, we've kind of categorized them on those in that category in the table of contents, from avoiding surveillance, which includes data collection apps like Tele, and organizational digital security resources, monitoring, circumventing censorship, which includes tools like Uniprobe, which Eman mentioned, for monitoring censorship and blocked websites in your area and in your network. And then also website security, which Eman also pointed to, and a couple of those platforms are Eclipsis, which is a virtual private server platform that hosts at-risk websites and offers kind of secure hosting and maintenance for those who have the capacity to manage their own websites. And then Deflect, which is also a website protection service for partners and activists whose websites face, targeted cyber attacks. So a range of tools there that we'd love to check out, just to get an awareness of what some of these tools are, and the projects that are going into these are testing and feedback loops there. But they are all in a range of development status too. So just to note that, some are earlier in their process and some are more finalized or more advanced. So I think just throwing that out there, if people want to keep mentioning any of these tools, feel free, but I would love to follow up on the accessibility point that you were mentioning, Eman, and maybe turn to you, Tanya, if you would like to speak a little bit more to that and the importance of that, finding that accessibility for the partners based on their specific needs, and maybe how you build that into integrating the tool into programming and the training of partners and hearing their concerns.
Thanks, Madeleine. I guess I would like to start by saying that even if people actively come up with ideas for the different tools that I would like to use, it doesn't necessarily mean that when the tool is ready that everybody's going to just jump on it and use it right away. It's still a process. I have kind of worked with 2 different partners on integrating Tele specifically into their work, but also a range of other different tools. And speaking from that experience, I can say that for example, one organization I remember, they kind of really liked Tella from the beginning, and they were more active in using it. The other organization struggled a little more. I think it has to do with kind of the demographics of the membership of that organization. So when we're speaking about integrating tools into somebody's work, I guess the environment, it's very important to consider the specific environment in which people operate, meaning tech environment, and in general, their tech habits and what kind of tools they're used to. So with that other organization that was a bit slower in taking in Tele, we helped them by training trainers, a set of trainers that would kind of go around and help their fellow members of the organization to download Tele, show them how to use it, practice with them. We've learned over the years that it's also very nice if those trainers kind of served as tech support for the people that they have trained, so that the users know somebody that they can contact in case they have they experience some issues, because people forget, or they change a device or what have you, and they start having these issues. And if it's in the heat of the moment, let's say in the middle of an election day, sometimes people panic or what not, and it's nice to have somebody that they know that they can reach out to and ask for help. Over the years, though, some people have really became kind of fans of Tele champions, and we integrated them into this kind of training this trainers pool. Over the years, more and more people were able to train their fellow members, and kind of the number of users has increased. Another thing that I've witnessed is that the longer people use the tool, the more ownership they feel and the less external support they need in order to integrate this instrument into their work. So with both of the organizations that we supported in integrating Tella for data collection, I think both of them have kind of grown to really like Tella and see it as an essential instrument to their work. And one of them is now building their own kind of data management instrument, and they wanted to make sure that Tella would work with that, like that Tella would integrate with that thing that they're building. So this kind of shows how much they've grown to like Tella and to be reliant on it. And I think also the same group that struggled in the beginning is now much more independent in using Tella. They have this pool of trainers. They can train new users that can provide some ad hoc tech support to them that know how to operate Tella. So yeah, the longer people use it, the more they get used to these tools. However, it can be a slow process. So if you're looking to integrate some new tools into people's work, just be aware of the fact that these kind of tech habits are not very quick to change, and it might just take a while. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's really great to hear the kind of your experience over the years and kind of how it does take some time, but the training of trainers model is a really great one, I think, for being able to have, point of contacts and people who have that expertise, locally and within their partner organizations. And I like Tele champions. That's great too. So I think on that point, I would love to hear from you, Raphael, if you'd be able to. And also maybe want to give you a chance to answer the question in the chat on taking into consideration the Pegasus scandal, how resilient Tele would be to cyber attacks like that. And then at the same time, if you'd like to touch on that and also speak to maybe the role of UX and user experience in tool development, and kind of like Tanya was saying, where people have they know what they need and then they can identify that, but then it takes the process of figuring out how they interact with the tool and what actually works best. So that would love to hear that.
Sure. Yeah, I'll start with UX and then I'll talk about Pegasus a little bit. Yeah, I think that Tanya really kind of hit the nail on the head in like what how important usability and just working with communities is in developing a tool like Tella. And our organization is called Horizontal, and the reason is because we try to flatten the hierarchy between developers and communities. And so that's really kind of a core part of our values and how we work in general and how we develop technology. And so usability is really, I'm not going to say the most important because privacy and security is probably the most important, but a private and secure tool that is open source, but that is not usable is not going to be of any use to anyone. So I would say that usability is just on par with security and privacy when it comes to how important it is to make sure it actually serves its purpose. And I think, OTF's usability lab, there is also Internews has a UX fund that provides support to tools and open source software to kind of take the time and take the energy to focus on usability and UX. And those are very instrumental in helping us, because as tool developers, sometimes it's hard to kind of, we're so busy developing new features and trying to move the tool forward. We don't take the time to just talk to the users and talk to people who actually have ideas and feedback on how to improve the tool. But that is really kind of the most important we can do, I think. Even if all the features are late, even if all the features are not as great as they should be, there isn't all the kind of extra stuff going on in the app. I think usability consultations, usability testing, working with those communities directly when doing the design rather than waiting until you have a prototype and getting it into the hands. All of that is just completely, just very critical in making sure that the app ends up working with for what they need. So I think it's not possible to invest too much time into UX, into usability testing, into consulting with partners, and then working with networks on the ground. I think a big part of it is also not to hope that you're going to release the app and then people are going to start using it. I think that's a little bit delusional. Maybe when it comes to commercial tools that might work, but when it comes to human rights and open source tech, it's a little different. So working with networks and groups and organizations like NDI or like local partners or like communities on the ground who already have these existing networks so that they can share feedback and they can share suggestions for improvements. So for example, Tella was recently used in Myanmar after the coup. And we are lucky to be directly in touch with the people using it and directly in touch with the organizations deploying it. And every time we have a conversation, they have another idea and another request and another suggestions for improving. And so we're not able to implement all of those immediately, but at least we know where the priority should be and what direction we should go into. So I think having that direct communication channel and connection with on-the-ground communities is really the most important when it comes to making tools that are actually going to be used and usable by communities on the ground. And on the questions of Pegasus, I think that's a great question, a question that everyone should be asking really. And I think, so a big part of Tella is really to encrypt content and data on the phone. So in theory, that would make it resilient to something like Pegasus. The only caveat there is that maybe the Pegasus team studied Tella and was like, oh, we want to break, the encryption, not the encryption, but we want to have access to communications on Signal. We want to have access to communications on WhatsApp. We want to have access to user photos and videos in the gallery. We also want to have access to the data that's in Tella. And so that's possible. And in that case, they would probably be able to break kind of our protection safeguards. The blessing that we have at this moment is that we're small enough and not used by millions of people and not used by large communities that it's, I would say, highly unlikely that Pegasus is able to go into the data that Tella is hosting, just because either they don't know it or they don't have an interest and a need because we're just still so niche. Let's convene again in 5 years, see what Tella is. Maybe we'll be in a different place and maybe we will get the attention of organizations like NSO Group and Pegasus, but I don't think it's quite a pressing threat at this time.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you for the question, Katarina. And if anybody else has questions or thoughts they want to share in the chat, please feel free to. We are just wrapping up, getting close to the end already. It goes so quickly and I want to respect people's time. So maybe we can just do like 1 or 2 more questions if there's, or 1 more question if there's nothing in the chat. But I think the points that you were hitting on, Raphael, with usability and the importance of that, as kind of everybody's been mentioning today, is just so important and really what sets the open source and internet freedom community apart, with really focusing on users' needs, user testing, constant iterative developments, rather than just trying to do a commercial product for the largest audience or something. So that's so important and really how we want to help bridge the gap a little bit that we see on our team with, helping partners get more connected, just like Tanya was doing with you and Horizontal, and with her partners in Tele. So I think maybe to end it on one last note, I don't, if I kind of open a question up to the group about how you see kind of the future for trying to engage opportunities for engaging these communities more down the road. And maybe, Eman, if this is where you'd like to touch on other things like the Rapid Response Fund as well, that OTF is working on. But we would love to hear, your thoughts on the future of kind of fostering more collaboration and sustainability among these 2 communities. I don't know, Eman, if you'd like to get started or yeah.
I can get started. Yeah, I mean, on the future, like, I really don't know what to say here. Like, it's not very optimistic view, you know, like more countries are shutting down the internet. That's, I guess, one of the biggest challenges we're looking at right now when it comes to like accessing information. When you look at numbers of like how many internet shutdown happened like 5 or 6 years ago in 1 year, and how many internet shutdowns are happening right now, there is a huge increase. I think that's going to be one of the main challenges we're looking at, specifically with countries now, like knowing that if they censor content that's not sustainable, everyone would get a VPN eventually, whether it's a commercial or they have access to a VPN because of the organization they work for, whatever. So now we're seeing more shutdowns, and I think that's a very big area that we would be looking at OTF and trying to invest more in that space, because it's amazing to have all these secure and privacy enhancing tools, but then if they're all dependent on the existence of an active internet connection, then we're all under questioning for what's that's going to mean. And currently what we see in that space is still more like ready packages of information that could be available to users in a shutdown, but like nothing further to that that would enable people to access real-time information. So I think that's going to be one big space we look at. And then I think when it comes to like censorship machines and all, it's a continuous cat and mouse game to know if something revolutionary will come up there to just define the game in a different way. But one interesting thing I guess we're seeing now with that is researchers exposing the vulnerabilities of the network when you have a censorship machine working in the network. So for example, one of the Geneva unexpected finding, that's one OTF projects that we support to understand censorship machine in different countries, is actually that when you have a censorship machine in the network, that actually expose a lot of cyber security vulnerabilities that even governments or whoever is implementing these machines will be worried about these possible attacks for other sectors that they don't necessarily target. But on that note, we would continue to engage with communities we support. I think we would continue to see the importance of ideas coming from people who would potentially use these tools. And that's kind of the general perspective. Maybe you mentioned Rapid Response Fund. Rapid Response Fund is our way to provide support for digital emergencies. So if any civil society organization, human rights defenders, journalists, whoever is going through a digital emergency and they need quick, reliable support with hosting, with digital security support, and other stuff, then we're available for that. Rapid Response Fund is not our most popular fund, so we're trying to get it promoted across different audiences. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, just I can continue on that, on the future of open source and human rights tools. I think a huge thing really is what Eman was talking about, which is internet shutdowns. Even a tool like Tella is designed to work well offline, because if you're in rural areas, if you're in the Amazon, if you're or if there is a temporary shutdown, you want to make sure you're still able to collect data. So what happens then? It's great to have the data and to have all of that on your phone encrypted, hidden, but if you're not able to send it anywhere, it's really not of much use. So I think developing and trying to build collaborations around circumventing internet shutdowns is really going to be the main challenge in the next few years, or already today. And other than that, I think the future, I do feel a little optimistic, I would say, at least in terms of the ecosystem, even though things are going wrong in a very bad direction, like Eman was saying, in terms of surveillance, censorship, repression, internet shutdowns. But in terms of the ecosystem, I feel like 10 years ago, the thinking was technology is going to save everything and everyone. Just bring Twitter and there's going to be democracy. And I think everyone has sobered up a little bit. Everyone realizes that things are a lot more complex than that. But that also means that we are able to embrace the complexities of the work. We're able to just face those a little bit more realistically. And at the same time, OTF is growing, supporting more projects. I think more organizations that are working on human rights realize that technology can be a tool in the toolbox, and so are willing to invest more resources and time thinking about how we can develop this ecosystem. So I think the community is definitely moving in an interesting and constructive direction.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's great. Yeah, exactly. And Tanya, I know we are a little over time here, but if you have any point you wanted to add to that too, and then
very briefly.
Yeah.
I would just say that I really love seeing this continuous engagement between developers and the users and these communities. I think most of the developers have realized that without this engagement, their tools aren't going to be used, they aren't going to be sustainable. And so this kind of iterative process is just crucial, something that Raphael has been talking about. And this is something we've done with Tella. This is something I see with other tools. And I think this is really, really important. And NDI and others should continue supporting this dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's just so interesting, could go on for so long. So we'll wrap us up here, but thank you all so much for your inputs and for joining us today. It's great to hear your experiences and all the work that you're doing, and NDI, and we definitely want to keep supporting this engagement and collaboration. So thank you very much to our speakers, Tanya, Eman, and Raphael. And if you'd like to throw your contact information in the chat, and maybe people would like to stay in touch, or otherwise, please feel free, everybody, to reach out to our NDI Democracy and Technology team with any questions or at any point. We can put our email in the chat as well. And that concludes our conversation for today. And there will be a recording available on NDI's YouTube page. But please join us next week at the same time and same place for our final session in our summer series conversation, which will hopefully feature a positive and hopeful note to wrap up the series on envisioning a positive tech-empowered future of democracy. So thank you all so much and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, Maddie. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks so much, viewers.